Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Jabberoo, the Japanese Shabaroo podcast. Um, we are starting off with the spring season discussions now that winter is finally out of the way. And what better way to get us started than with one of my favorite series, One Piece, who just recently came back. So, okay, episode 1123 is really stunning. Like how everything opened, which is visually stunning with the going from the dusk to dawn, very One Piece esque. As you know, like in the dawn, One Piece has a very the dawn has a very important theme to it, where as as you know, in the world is covered in darkness, and everybody's working to bring the new dawn as like part of like how Wano was. So the episode starting off uh, with dawn appearing was very powerful messaging, and we do kind of get to a point where the news crew starts delivering newspapers all over, and this is like my least favorite part of the episode, where it was kind of like just recapping a lot of what happened to leading up to this episode, with Garp going missing, and the news crew delivering the paper that says that Luffy took hostage of Vegapunk and barricaded himself in Egghead, which to the Gore saying the Navy is a very good thing, because Morgan's really working overtime to put the Navy and the world government in like the best position ever by like manipulating the news and not really telling the whole truth of the story, which we know that Morgan does like the news, does like the truth, but he does like spinning it along a lot. And we as that happens, we get more of like how the world is handling the news with Kokoyoshi Village, where Luffy grew up, and all the people that he knew, like really taking in the news of Garp going missing and Luffy being a criminal per se, and everybody's not really worried about Garp, but Makino does make like a somewhat like a stern, like disappointed look, or like she's concerned for Luffy. And Makino's kid does end up having like a reaction whenever he sees Luffy, and it just goes to show kind of like the warm smile that Luffy has, and the how he affects other people, even though they don't really know him, like the kid, but just his overall presence is so shining, kind of like the sun, him being sun god, the sun god, and all. And we get a really nice world building portion with how, while this news was being passed around, I should say, there's an earthquake happening that is like very destructive. As waves, you see everybody shaking, and the whole world feels it, and sea level starts to rise like about a meter, as what they said. And it came to the overall conclusion that this was a cause of what happened to Lulusia Kingdom 6 days after its disappearance. And I like to I like how this really goes to show that One Piece overall in the world has been flooding over time, as there's evidence in Wano, and now there's even more evidence here, and with Lulusia creating a big hole, or with Emu creating a big hole where Lulusia was, it almost is perfectly aligned with what with the hole in Annie's lobby. So it makes you wonder if there's like two great floods that were happening in the world, and if it keeps happening, the whole world of One Piece is just gonna be submerged underwater, and it really makes sense how things keep happening to build up and eventually lead to the top end, which makes where the celestial dragons are very convenient as they're like 10,000 feet above sea level. But moving on from that, there is more action that's about to occur in Egghead with basically double the size of a filibuster coming for Luffy and the crew, with 9 vice admirals, Admiral Kizaru, and even a Gorosei that I'm sure the Straw Hats don't know even is coming. And this just goes to show how much they really want to get rid of Vegapunk, who has read the Boyd, who knows the history behind the Boyd Century now, and its overall threat to the world government. And as they're approaching Egghead, the Marines encounter the sea beast, and Kizaru's the one that shoots one of them down first. And it's kind of sad because they kind of wanted to avoid having to destroy these this technological advances, but given that it's either them or technology, they definitely had to choose themselves. And even Kizaru like points it out to a axe guy that this is not something that he wished to do. It's something that he has to do because he is a Navy dog, and this is what's required of him. So there's already inklings that Kizaru not necessarily wants to. It's not necessarily okay with getting rid of Vegapunk, but it's something that, as his job, he has to do. And then the Gorosei get a call from Egghead Island, which obviously Kizaru and all those ships intersect with their black Denden Mushi snail. And we start listening to the conversation of York with the Gorosei and how York wanted to know what's happening because they are sending ships after her and marine troops. And the Gorosei pretty much said that they want to get rid of all the Vegapunks, but then they also strike a deal with York, making sure that they will make sure she's the only Vegapunk that remains, because they are somebody up above is interested in the mother frame, which at this point we know is Simu. But obviously they can't say that through Denden Mushi, so they kind of leave it vague for her. And she has her own. York has her own terms, which are, one, not to destroy the lab because she needs that to create the mother flame, and two, she wants to be turned into a celestial dragon, which York, being the greed of Vegapunk, makes sense. Now, being a celestial dragon is very scummy. We know how these people are, and the damage they cause to other civilians, but to York they are pretty much the embodiment of what she does. They don't do anything. They just sit up there and basically rule. They don't have to worry about food. At least that's what she thinks is happening, which we know right now it's kind of the food shortages and marriage are very limited. But it's all hanging in dandy because York does make the impression that she is okay when she's calling them, but it turns out to be like a facade, because in reality the Straw Hats with some CP0 agents and Vegapunk actually have put her down, and are making her talk for them, and she, on her last statement, she wants them to save her from Luffy and the crew, because according to her, Luffy will kill her, which Zoro more than likely, doesn't really care. He's kind of like laughing, like, yeah, we should probably end her. We don't have any more use of her. But Luffy does have like a very great idea, which is very Luffy-esque. Like, he just wants to set sail, so he's like, maybe we can use her as a shield. Which, even though it seems cruel, it is very Luffy-like, because he has done it in the past, where he's used any people he can manage as shield before, like Helmeppo in early arcs, in the early arc, some Marines when he was in like Annie's lobby, and among other times. So Luffy protecting himself with another presence very much in his wheelhouse. And I and then of course near the end we do get the opening visuals for the new opening for One Piece. And if there is a lot of spoilers in that one, for at least for the manga people like me that know what's happening. There's a lot of things that they're hinting towards, and a lot of things that maybe if you can just listen to the song and avoid the visuals, but they are very, very stunning to look at. uh, and aside from that, I think that's all on the, at least on what happened in the episode. Now, to get into some of my complaints of the episode, uh Sanji has kind of made, it seems to be a very anti-Sanji agenda going on in Toei. So, for example, when everybody was with holding York down, or holding York down, he disappeared from the frame. He was nowhere to be seen. And then there's a scene with Bonnie where he's bringing her pancakes, and he's having these hard eyes, which in the manga Sanji's present when they're holding York down, and he's not effectuated by Bonnie in the manga, which Toei kind of like took their own liberties in that. And I think Toei is really trying to ruin Sanji as a character, and it's not the first time they've done it. There's a bunch of other times where they have done it, and I'm not liking that. Sanji is one of the better written characters in One Piece, and he deserves justice. But yeah, I mean, the other complaint I really have is that most of this episode is a lot of recap, which, as a coming back episode, I don't think it was necessary. I think the anime should adapt more than one chapter per episode. Since they had that hiatus, they should be able to adapt it at least more properly, which I don't think they have. And yeah, I think Toei is really dropping the ball by not making it more as a seasonal anime, and they're still trying to work around the fact that it's gonna be a long running show. And that's the complaint. That's also the complaints I have about it. Especially the recap. It wasn't necessary, because they did a 1 hour and like 30-minute recap episode recapping the entire first part of Egghead. So there's no really point in having another recap on this episode. But overall, I think this episode's like a 8 out of 10. Definitely enjoyed it. So, Fire Force Season 3 is finally back, and I'm so happy for it to be back, because it's been 5 years since anything Fire Force related has happened. We just had an announcement, and then we just did not see anything for the longest time. So, that's why I kind of did appreciate a bit of the recap that this episode had, and it just, the overall animation for this feels a bit different, but also feels still really good. It's and it I love how it kicks off with like Shinra and Arthur having their little fight or like training session with one another, as well as Maki and Tamaki having their own little sparring session, while Obi was well, the recap was done well with Obi just talking as if he's handing in a report, and then it just kind of recapping everything that has happened within the past 2 seasons in a short span of time. And then after all that is said and done, Obi realizes that maybe they're way in over their head as the army shows up, and they're like, okay, we kind of need to jail you. And he wonders why, and then he sees that the white clad is right behind the army. So now this really sets up that what they knew, they actually still had a lot more to learn about, because the white clad is in deep with the government and in deep with the churches, that there's really no escaping the clutches that they have, and the goals that they have is probably more than likely gonna be very hard to stop. And we start also like learning how Shinra and Arthur both go under their latent power, like historical power, hysterical power that they learned from Benimaru in the prior season. And I love how they're both pretty opposites from one another. Like Shinra, in order to draw in this power, he says he has to visualize death and use that to fuel his hysterical power. Meanwhile, Arthur, he is, given that he is a knight and he likes pretending he's a knight, his way of drawing in this power is by imagining himself being maxed out in a video game with all stats, and that's how he's able to draw it in. So while one is like in his own reality, Shinra is stuck between death. So yeah, and then we get more about Burns, and he meets up with one of the church leaders, and this is where this episode was a lot of world building, and honestly, like, it would require a lot of notes to really get the gist of everything that's going on, and maybe I'll even have to rewatch the first 2 seasons. But Burns realizes that the church is in with the white clad, and that they are the ones that are also after the Adola burst, and they're involved with everything to do with them. So it really goes to show that a lot of things are working towards the second great cataclysm, But not only that, the second great cataclysm is only part of their beginning of their overall plan. So whatever the plan is, it's gonna involve that happening, and who knows what's gonna happen afterwards, which I am very interested to find out why the great cataclysm has to happen in order for them to get what they eventually want. And then, of course, Company 8 finds out about what happened to Obi, and now they're like, oh, we gotta go get Obi. But in doing so, they're coming to a realization that if we go, we're gonna be making enemies of Unit 1 and Unit 2, who are heavily involved with the armies and the churches. So yeah, they it is gonna be an all-out war essentially that they're gonna have to prepare for, and this episode ends with finally them realizing Obi is getting too much influence, that they have to get rid of him because he is the one that's been that's been like forming alliances with the rest of the Fire Force companies, and he is gaining too much notoriety, too much influence. So they decide, well, if we have to get rid of him, we might as well make good use of him, and they're gonna basically give him the Inferno testing, which they're gonna give him the bug that turns people into Infernos. Which now we kind of realize that the churches are the ones that are kind of helping the White Clad create these. And yeah, I mean, this episode was great. Once again, minus the small recap stuff, but which was very much great appreciated, given that it was a 5-year wait for a new season. And yeah, I just really things I really love is how much the world building is opening up already, and how much I still don't know what's gonna happen. But hopefully this season will make it more easier for me to understand what will happen and what's going on in the Fire Force world. And yeah, overall another 8 out of 10 episode. Okay. Then on Fire Force. So I mean Windbreaker season 2 is finally here. It it basically kicks off right where the last one left, with everybody going into the kill layer, but it does start off kind of like where the episode kind of ends, and then it goes backwards leading up to what happened, which was really cool. I love how you can notice as soon as Sakura was heading there, you can see how much she was getting frustrated as everything was building. And as soon as he gets there, or as soon as everybody gets there into the kill layer, the first thing they do is demand that they let go of Nagato. And there everybody's like, nah. The leader's like, nah, we'll make an example out of him and out of you, essentially. And they just get swarmed with everybody from Kill. But they're kind of like riffraff, and everybody kind of looks like, okay, well, we're kind of outnumbered here. And one of the guys is just like, well, that just means we just got to take 4 to 5 a piece. No biggie. And as everybody's kind of in this brawl, the kill leader is kind of analyzing how everybody fights, and comes to the conclusion of like the 5 strongest, who he's like, okay, well, everybody else is on a subpar level except Sakura, Suo, the strong guy, the wrestling guy, and the guy with pink hair. And basically, after he realizes, okay, well, my people are kind of weak compared to them, then he starts bringing in the Keel's VIP players, who then start going after Bufferin's top 5. And as things are starting to sway in Keel's favor, Sakura starts becoming more and more desperate to reach the kill leader. And he starts seeing like everybody's starting to get outnumbered and outpowered, which just makes him even lose his composure even more. And he's seen his friends get hit, or like the people that he's in charge of as the great captain, start to really get in dangerous situations. And you can really notice that Sakura came in there without a proper plan or a proper strategy. And now that this these new people that are stronger came in, his all out, like, let's just fight, is not really gonna cut it anymore. And it's this lack of leadership that really lose that really makes him lose confidence and makes him question his own abilities, especially after Nire starts feeling a bit like an anchor, or like a weight, unnecessary weight, as Suo is just barely able to protect them, even though Suo is kind of putting up a front that, while he's protecting Nire, is essentially what's giving him the strength to be as strong as he is. And Nire just kind of like loses it and tries to do more than what he's capable of, and tries to fight somebody, take somebody down, and he just ends up getting completely like knocked out, or like completely taken out of the picture, I should say. And Sakura sees this, and the way you see Sakura's eyes shift is like so powerful, because this is him seeing Nire, a person he not only brought up to not be lame, who he values highly as a friend, to see him lay out flat, bloodied, it not breaks him, but it pushes him even further to the edge, where he starts becoming even more desperate to go and help Nire, go and help his other castmates. And that carelessness gets him caught and gets him hit by the other people around him. And things were looking super dire. Sakura and the other strong combatants are busy handling these VIP people, which means the other people that are just like decent fighters are starting to get outnumbered. It was looking dim. And at Sakura's Sakura gets a little blessed as the second year show up, who kind of, even though it's only Kaji and his other two vice captains, they pretty much come in and start shifting the morale around. And I love that what this brought up, because with Kaji being there and the kill leader realizing, okay, well, things are going to be a bit more hectic, the kill leader starts talking to Kaji like, hey, how are you going to come in here into our lair? Aren't you supposed to be protecting the town, not get involved with outside of the town? And Kaji really brings up a nice quote where he's like, Furin protects the town, everything in town, and that includes the people, the buildings, and anything they deem important to them. So, because Nanase is important to somebody from Buffering, that means it's up to Furin to be there and protect them as well. So this, with Kaji being there and his whole reputation, the other people start to kind of show signs of like fear, but uh, the kill leader demonstrates them well. You might not like the idea of fighting Kaiji and the other two second years, but if you don't, you're gonna end up like this guy, the Nagato, who they beat up. So with Kill, it is very much a rule by fear, whereas Furin or Bufferin is very much a protector role for everybody. So you protect what's important to me, and I protect what's important to you. It's very mutual. So very different ideologies at play here. And Kaiji ends up trying to be the one that goes to take him down, but Sakura refuses to let him go, and Kaiji like puts some sense into Sakura, where it's like he gives him the talk that he needed to hear, where it's like, listen, what you're doing is very pathetic. If you can't even take care of somebody that's a nobody, how do you expect to take on the leader? It's like you are focusing your attention on something you are not doing right now. Let me handle the leader. You handle this guy, because if you don't align your focus, you won't be able to protect anybody, and you won't be able to take care of anybody. And you know, this is just goes to show kind of like also what Sakura lacks is as a leader as well. Like he needs to realize that he can't take on everything on himself. He has to allow others to pitch in and also focus on what he needs to take care of before he can avert his focus on something else. And Sakura does say, okay, well, just give him a punch for me. 10 punches in the nose to be exact. And Kaiji abides. And yeah, that's the end of the episode. Overall thoughts for Windbreaker for me. I love the action. I love how the characters are shown, and I love how little we get of them talking, but also through their actions, how much we learn of the characters. And this parallel that Sakura has with Kaiji is amazing. I think seeing that Kaiji also in the prior season was in a similar position to Sakura, and now Sakura has kind of like a map of how he can do things, is good for him and good for his growth overall. And now that he's not going to have to worry about the leader, he's going to be able to focus on this guy that was kind of taking care of him. Now we're really going to see how Sakura grows from this. And also, like, this will be probably the start of Nirei undergoing some growth, as this is this moment where he pretty much got beat up and taken out of action. He is gonna make him realize how much, or made him realize how little he can provide to everybody. Or maybe if he was more capable of a fighter, or at least able to defend himself, it would just strengthen how much, or it would strengthen Buffering, and also give less weight for Sakura to worry about. But yeah, I will say I think the animation's a bit different from the prior season, but it's not too much. It is kind of like a big bro, so I understand there's not gonna be like that kind of action like in the first episode of last season. So overall, 9 out of 10 episode for me. Apothecary Diaries, episode 37. So continuing on with the spring season, Apothecary Diaries second quarter begins, and we get a nice look, a good look at a lot of the eunuchs being around and seeing what they do. Like apparently there's like somebody new coming in, which we later find out he's also kind of like in a similar terms with Shinji as far as lookers. To me personally, I feel this new eunuch is seems to be like the girl that left in the previous season. So I I can't wait to see if that's her because she it seems a lot like her, but we will wait and see. Shaolin, one of Mamo's close friends, since coming into the rear palace, is trying. It's kind of contemplating what to do because her term is coming to an end, and now she needs to find out what she can do as far as getting a job. So Momo is kind of like thinking, okay, well, I can just hook her up with the grandma from the Verdigris house with all her sisters, and it's just not. It's almost like last resort for her to like do that. It's like maybe we should try to find something else, in which then Shisui kind of joins in talking to them about it. They go to the bathhouse, which we learned a bit more about how the rear palace is kind of done, where all the lower workers in the rear palace, like Shaolin and and Shisui and Mamo, I guess as well, they they have to bathe in this big open bathhouse. Meanwhile, like a lot of the higher concubines are have their own private one, which makes it kind of confusing to them when they see Lishu being spotted there a few times, because technically she does have her own bath private bath to herself, but they don't really question her on first meeting. They kind of want Shisui to introduce them to some of the connections she has, which Shisui does introduce them to some of the higher concubines that are in the bathhouse where they're kind of getting massages and stuff. And Mamo realizes that a lot of them are kind of hairy, which then she brings up how she has this technique with rubber bands where she can pluck hairs out that is less irritable than using a razor to get rid of the body hair. And as she's as her and Shalon and Shizu are there, they Mama realizes kind of like the importance of doing all this, and says to her lady in waiting like if she can do this more often, and how she wants to do it in this other day, and she agrees because this is a great way for them to get information, and also to for the higher concubines to see what kind of rumors are floating around in the real palace, which to not anyone's surprise, there is a lot of rumors going around where all the lady in waitings are, or the higher concubines I should say, are pregnant. Mama's master, like her lady, is kind of having rumors pass around that she is pregnant, as well as some of the other higher concubines. And this is where they learn of the rumor of a new eunuch coming to town, coming to the rear palace, which to to Mama's surprise is kind of like, okay, well, Shinji gets brought up as they're kind of being compared as probably the two prettiest uh eunuchs, and then and then Momo gets flashback as she looks to her hand of how she was grabbing Shinji's not so not Toad. And yeah, pretty, pretty funny. Then Mamo realizes well, not Mamo goes and talks to some of the newer recruits that her lady has, and one of them, and it's around her age, so her older sisters decide for her that Mamo should connect more with her, and she takes her to see her friends at the bathhouse, and they're kind of like, oh, teasing her a lot because she is their same age, but she's more developed, and now they're kind of giving her the ropes, also on how to do the massages, and yeah, it's been this is where they re-see once again Lady Li Shu, who happens to pass by again, and this time Mao makes her mission, or like she wants to find out why she's there, and decides, you know what, I'll give you a massage. And there while she's there, she realizes that she has like irritation from all the um from shaving off her hairs as well. So she gives her the treatment of plucking hairs with her rubber bands, and she is very grateful and invites him over to drink cold juice, which my mom and her friends obviously accept. And this then they ask her about why she's doing there, because obviously she has her own private bath, and we find out that she doesn't bathe in her private bath because there is apparently a ghost in her bathhouse. And that's how the episode ends. So that's my overall thoughts on this episode. I think it is setting up a lot, and this brings me back to another earlier portion of season 1 where everybody thought there was like a dancing ghost in the wall. So I'm very interested to find out if it's like the same person, if it's a different person that's making Lisha think her place is haunted. But and also, like, I think it's setting up a lot also with like Mamo obviously having lingering feelings towards Shinji and their Toad incident. Just kind of makes makes Momo more interested, Mamo more interested in Shinji. So uh I give this like an 8 out of 10 as well for now. That's it. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm gonna probably do one of the new animes this time. The beginning after the end is gonna be up next. I just gotta do something real quick where I gotta block somebody in chat that I don't think that I think is a bot actually. So. Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, let me get the images up. We are heading into new anime territory now. So, hope you guys enjoy. This will be debate discussion starting soon. Just gotta take some sip of water and stuff before getting started. Okay. Beginning after the end, starting in 3, 2, 1. So, T-Bait or the beginning after the end. Episode 1 finally premiered, the much awaited manhwa debut with a lot of controversy before airing finally dropped. So I will say the beginning was very interesting for me personally because we get a look at Arthur's previous life where he was a king and he was a very strong and dominant king where he took over the entire world, it seemed like, or at least definitely a nation through his sheer power. And then for some odd reason he gets reincarnated. So I am made to believe that he died or something happened to him. Maybe he got poisoned. Something. Maybe the manga will clarify it better. But he gets reincarnated, and this basically is just like a start of Mushoku Tensei episode 1, or where he gets reincarnated into a new baby. He has no idea who the people that are his parents actually are, and he has no idea what's how he came about it. And it honestly, this is like one of the things that I think it does better than Mushoku Tensei, where he is so caught up on his previous life that he's failing to accept, or not not necessarily not accept, but he is having a hard time coming to understanding of what he has to do moving forward. Where there was something about him reaching light this time, but not necessarily explained all that well. And there's a lot of internal monologue with him and how he sees his current situation, where it very much seems like he's anxious and he doesn't like the feeling of not being in control, as in his previous life he was, like I said, the king or ruler of the world or of a nation. And now he's reduced to a baby who can't even control his own bowel movements. And and it as he's as you're seeing it through his view, you start seeing more things like how in this new world people are allowed like their own weapons and their own agencies. And in his previous world, he's comparing it to where he's the only one that was kind of allowed agency and allowed to have weapons, unless it was to like conquer other worlds. I don't think people were allowed to gather weapons to try to do like a coup d'etat per se. And as you're seeing his early days, you start seeing him as a toddler, and he's starting to move on his own now finally, and is able to grab books. So you start seeing how more freedom he feels he has now, and how less anxious and less of and less not less angry, but a little bit more lively per se. And one of the I love how he starts, as he's reading books now, he starts seeing how the current world he's in is far less technologically advanced than his previous world, which in the beginning openings of the episode we do see there's a lot of technology in his older world. And unlike his other world, this world has mana, and in his previous world it was just known as, it was kind of ki. But I feel like that's kind of like interconnected, especially given what happens this episode. And the other major difference with this world and his world is that in here the ruler of the world is being inherited, whereas in his old world he pretty much had to go and conquer the world. So now we get more understanding of he's coming to, as he's realizing more of how this world works, he he's acknowledged how different they are and how much he still doesn't know. So like he wants to know more. And this also brings into question, like, in his current body, which is less than like 2 years old still, his body is still pretty much a person to him. He doesn't have a lot of agency still. He has a little bit more than when he first reincarnated, but not as much as he would like. But given his circumstances, he makes the most of everything, where he goes whenever him and his mother go to town. He doesn't just like see it as sightseeing or anything like that. He's going in town to realize, to not to realize, but to get further knowledge of how the world works, whether it's how to use mana, how weapons are being sold, what people want in the world, all this stuff that he would not find out in his own living space. And then we have a kind of like thing that he's been kind of working on with trying to create a monocore, which people can't create monocores, I think, until they're in their teens. And he is, as a 2 year old or less than 3 year old at least, he's already forming his own monocore, and this eventually leads to him blowing up his own house. Funny enough, he's getting too powerful, and his parents are kind of worried that something happened to him. So they go and see what he's at, and it almost came where the roof came crashing down on him, and he thought, oh, well, I'm dead now. Pretty much already designing himself to an early grave. And then he sees his parents save him. And this is kind of like also unknown territory for him, where he pretty much sees them cry and he can't quite understand why they're crying if they fulfill their duty as parents. Because as a parent, he realizes that they have a need to protect their child, and they have done that this time around. So why would they be crying, is how he sees it. And it just goes to show that how much less emotional ability he had, or like less empathetic he was in his previous life, where emotions almost did not come to him. And now he's having to deal not only with a new world, and also these emotions that were never a part of him in his previous life. And you get this really touching moment where he ends up holding his mother, and they're all huddling together as a family, and he starts crying. So I think this anime is great. I will not deny that this anime does not have the solo leveling budget animation, but it is, as a story, it is still gonna be a great story to experience, I feel. So going into this, seeing this anime, I'm not looking for animation that will blow me away. I'm looking to see how they adapt the story. And so for me, I really enjoy seeing the differences between this one and Mushoku Tensei, as they are kind of comparable from the beginning. But as I hear from other manga readers, it's only the beginning that's really kind of like Mushoku Tensei, and then it just goes off and it's its own thing. It's its own thing. And I'm looking forward to see that and see where they differ, because Mushoku Tensei is already a great anime, light novel, whatever. T-Bait needs to be its own thing, and that's what I'm excited to see how it differs. Other thing, Arthur as a main character, really entertaining. Seeing how he views the world, seeing how he sees his current circumstances, and how he adapts, and technically becomes a different person at the end of this episode because now he's allowing his emotions to flow freely. Uh, I cannot wait to see his growth and to see how they take this going forward because this is still a 2 year old or under 3 year old kid that just developed his own monocore, which you're not even supposed to be able to do till you're 14. So he is already having a major boost early in life, kind of. So hopefully it goes a different way than Mushoku Tensei, and I can't wait for more of this anime. First episode is the 8 out of 10 as well. Very good. So Jaiba episode 1. So I want to say this anime looks incredible, and I know that it's done by Wit, so I needed to check it out. I wasn't even sure if I was gonna discuss or talk about it, but after seeing the first episode, I am convinced that I have to talk about this because otherwise it's not gonna be talked about a lot or enough for my liking. So this is Jaiba Samurai Legend, a remake of an older manga series or animated series. And I love that in this first episode, it starts off with basically telling us the whole plot line of the anime. And then it is like two people are gonna be rivals and strive to be the strongest. And you have this really great animated sequence of them clashing with and fighting with like swords. And I will say though, the beginning does have a lot of flashing lights, so be very aware before you watch this. And I'm glad that they do kind of put up a warning that there's flashing lights in this anime. So be warned. And then I just adore the opening. The opening is so good. It gives me such nostalgic feeling while also feeling very new and very fresh, up to date. It's really hard to explain, but I also think the opening does not give away too much of what's gonna be happening in the anime. So I love it for that as well. That's a great opening in my opinion. Probably my second favorite thus far. And to kick off the actual story, we have Yaiba and his father who are like in the jungle, where with Yaiba kind of training. And in one of those training sessions, he's trying to get a gorilla to attack him. As you know, gorillas are the strongest creatures in that jungle apparently, and by beating that one, it's gonna pretty much prove that he is the toughest in the jungle. And I think it's more so to do with his father knowing of this prophecy that was told to us in the beginning of the episode, where Yaiba is gonna be that person that strives to be the strongest. So this is just a normal training session for him, and it gets to really showcase some of Yaiba's skills, where he's like swiftly dodging the attacks from the gorilla. And at one point the gorilla does send him flying, but it was to his own detriment, as Yaiba makes friends with a tiger and some like vulture, and the vulture kind of like takes him up in the sky and allows Yaiba to deliver the final blow. But that's to take nothing away from him, as with one blow he was able to completely beat the gorilla. So it just, Yaiba for his age seems to have a lot of strength and a lot of agility. Probably as much as his father, even though we don't really know how strong his father is. But his father does have a good gauge on how to determine strength. And here comes the silly portion where they both are running away from the pack of gorillas, and they end up in a banana packaging facility, and then they get shipped to what I'm assuming is Tokyo, and they meet Raizo, who is one of Jaiba's father's old rivals or current rival, because as Raizo's coming back from a tournament, he still is feeling frustrated that he can never beat Kanjuro or Jaiba's father. And after this meeting, this fateful meeting, they kind of I love that uh, Jaiba and his father have no sense of how the current world works, and they're still like trying to determine living as if they're in the jungle, where they're they're constantly fighting anybody in their way, like the police, and then they end up having to run away with Raizo and his his daughter to their place. So Sayuki is like the first girl Jaiba meets, and he is very happy, but also very confused. Confused in a way, but just more intrigued as to why they wear skirts, how they look, and that gets him into a bit of trouble later down the line, where he peeps on her and she kicks him out essentially. But as they get to Raiso's place, they have a small dojo in his place where they train people, and in order for Jaiba to be allowed to stay with Raizo, they kind of, well, not they, Jaiba's father makes a bed with this old lady who is kind of like the head of the household, I guess. And it's and it makes it where he and the strongest combatant in that dojo have to face off, and if Jaiba wins, they're gonna allow him to stay, which I found it very funny, where Jaiba was kind of mocking him, saying he's a gorilla, because even in character design, the guy does kind of resemble one, but it's just, and he's also like probably somewhat similar in strength. But given that Jaiba already beat one, he just realized, oh well, I'm kind of struggling to hit him, so why don't I just bait him out, and then get him, which he does. He baits him, turns his back on him, and uses pure instinct, where he senses his presence as he's about to strike, dodges it, and then lands his finishing blow. So Jaiba gets to stay with the household, and then it comes to more of a also more jungle jokes. I think this is gonna be a running gag, where where Jabba's gonna be like, oh well, this is how we did in the jungle, where because he beat this guy from the dojo, he then takes it upon himself to kind of have him for lunch, per se, and and everybody's like, no, you can't have him, because he was getting ready to cook him, and that that is so funny, where I think that's gonna be quite the gag to keep trying to pull forward. I don't think it's gonna work past this episode, but in this episode it worked really well. And then we have a bit more of Sajiki's dynamic with Jaiba, where Jaiba is not, as he's not aware that schools exist, and he has no idea of how like studying goes. He just thinks of it as training, and Sayuki tries to take it to her advantage, where he's trying to get him to back off, and kind of persuades him to chase her more, because she tells him, listen, I'm going to school, there's a lot of strong monsters there, you do not you should be worried. And instead of like scaring Jaiba, I think it just entices him to want to go see how strong these monsters are, and he goes, with he goes chases her to school, meets other girls where he's also kind of like uh it seems like his other running gag's gonna be just getting into girls' personal space and touching them and looking up their skirts. Not very fond of that, but because this is an older series, older anime, I think that's gonna be the overall consensus for a bit for on that. Um, and as they're in the new dojo where Sayaki trains with, or like at the school dojo, uh, Jaiba gets this wooden. He goes in there, gets this wooden stick, which is like part of the dojo, uh, and then he notices, and then somebody comes up behind him, which he doesn't notice right away, and this is quite an amazing feat to pull off because this just means somebody was able to bypass his instincts and and uh, suppress their presence enough that Jaiba couldn't detect them, which he's been able to do in the jungle, I guess. And my understanding is that he can only sense their presence if they have like hostility towards him, and because this guy came up to him without any hostility, he wasn't able to notice that he got snuck up on. And after witnessing this, guy was like, okay, well, me and you just gotta scrap now. And he does try to get the better of him, mock him like he did the previous guy, and then tries to catch him unaware, but the guy was too good. On instinct, he also was able to beat or disarm Jaiba, and Jaiba's like, okay, this guy's strong, and this pretty much starts their rivalry going forward. Um, my overall thoughts on this series as of episode 1, I think this is gonna be one of the more fun series to see, one of the more well animated to see, has some of the best choreography so thus far, aside from Windbreaker, of course. And overall, I think this is gonna be a great series to watch. I'm giving this first episode a nice 9 out of 10. Okay, so Sword of the Demon Hunter, episode 1. So I love this first episode of this new anime. So it kicks off with Jinta, and he's seeing his father kind of abuse or hit one of his close friends, or his sister in this case, as he abused her. And we don't really know why he's doing this or what they've done. We just know that we just get an understanding that the father is not happy with the current situation and who Jinta brought, and we later see that she has a red eye, which just can indicate one thing, that this girl is not human. First and foremost, that's the first hint that they give us, and then we get Jinta seeing going and seeing Susune, and he wants to go with her somewhere. Okay, he wants to leave, and Jinta goes with his sister, and they're kind of like in the dumps. They're being pretty much left to die. Nobody really goes and looks for them. It's a cold, rainy night, and this one wandering guy takes them in, and he takes them to this village, which is like kind of full of blacksmiths, and also this is where he kind of gets Jinta and Susune kind of get adopted into a family, and Shirayuki is one of their elder sisters, I guess you could say, who is younger than Jinta, but just because she was there first, she is the eldest. They are pretty much welcome with open arms, kind of like the opposite of how we see their father treat them. And it makes a nice comparison as to, oh, we really lucked out here. These people are nice. They treat us well, and we're gonna have a good life here. So we do have them kind of being able to play with children their own age, as far as we can tell, and this pretty much is such a nice way to get us to feel attached to the characters, which can only mean because which is kind of like another flag that should have gone off in my head of what was to come. But in it we see that Jinta and Shirayuki are kind of getting a little bit close to one another, and in doing so, she opens up about her mother being a Itsukihime, which is just like kind of like this village kind of god that protects over them. And because her mother is dead, she's not allowed to be with anybody around the village, kind of left as an outcast and secluded from everything, which eventually means that probably Shirayuki is gonna have to take up that role if anything happens to her mother. And in doing that, Jinta kind of takes up training with the sword, which he gets really frustrated as he feels like he's not making any progress, which then the guy that takes him in kind of lets him know, okay, listen, progress is made slowly, bit by bit. It doesn't happen overnight, and and nothing. And one of his better things that he adopted from him says that nothing is forever. So, as far as Jinta is concerned, his lack of skills with the sword are not gonna be forever. They're gonna be very powerful as he keeps making progress going forward. And as long as he keeps his training up, of course, he's going to keep getting stronger and stronger. And then we get what seems to be like a time skip, but it's actually just the current present time. And Jinta is already a renowned sentinel who hunts down demons. And we learn a little bit of lore behind demons and how they behave and how they are constantly after the Itsukihime person, because according to legend, if they eat her flesh, they develop immortality because of after consuming the flesh, which then they bring up that there was a previous demon that had done this, that can manipulate her age and whatnot, which already gives me into question, like, okay, maybe it's Jinta's sister Susune that's this demon, because I know the girl's a demon based on the fact that she had red glowing eyes and she has a bandage over her face, which people cannot see that she is part demon. And in here we then have Jinta remain back as we see Shirayuki does take over the Utsukimi role, and while they're alone, they kind of try to remain their former selves, where like it's not them being formal with one another. They're on first name terms, and Susune is also around, kind of like trying to stay within their range or within their premise as well, kind of like going back in older times. And we then find out as Susune leaves, because somebody's coming to the shrine, that some demons have been keeping eyes on her or keeping tabs on who she is. And that to me was very present, that okay, there's something more to Susune that we are not yet aware of. Another flag of what's to come, of course. And Shirayuki gets one day off to herself where she isn't the Itsukihime, and she spends time with Jinta and Susune, just like the old times where they had meals together. And then she gets to spend some alone time with just Jinta, which Jinta very much takes her around town, and everybody's like, oh, well, look at that, it's Jinta who's this girl that's what he's with, which is kind of depressing because uh Shirayuki, as she took over this role, her presence was completely seemed to be completely erased from the village, where even like the old friends that they were hanging out with when they were growing up, they don't even know who she is, as there's been years since they've seen each other. But the girl does remember Jinta though, and his preferences, as when she brings him a dango, she brings him a treat that he used to love when he was little. And afterwards, Jinta gets gets summoned again to take care of some demons. Well, prior to that, Jinta spends one last evening with Shirajuki, where she expresses her feelings for Jinta and how she actually loves him. And Jinta in this moment is kind of being untruth to himself, because he does love her. You can see that he does like her or love her, but his excuse for not running away with her, which she kind of said was an option, he said that it would betray his training and her sacrifice to be a Itsukime if he did if him and her did just abandon their positions and went to spend time with one another. And that's not something he feels he can do. And then they get then Jinta gets sent to take care of the demons that have been seen going around the village. And he meets one of them, and this one's kind of interesting because he does take an interest in Jinta and why he wields the sword. And of course, Jinta, being a human, does tell him that he wields it to protect people and protect anybody that needs it. And this guy, being a demon, says that he's just being a demon as he kills people and fulfills his wishes of being more stronger. And their fight was pretty good. They pretty much each get an arm off of one another. Although Jinta does seem to be in the losing end of the fight, until he does this very crazy maneuver where he grabs his broken sword and stabs the demon in the heart. And then the demon pretty much says the demon pretty much makes a good point to Jinta, like, what will you do when the people that you wanted to protect are no longer worth wielding your sword for? Which, this is kind of like another foresight of like, okay, well, he is protecting Shirayuki, he is protecting his younger sister Susune with his sword, but what's gonna happen if one of them is no longer worth protecting? What will he wield the sword for then? Very food for thought. And while Jinta's facing off this demon, Susan is paid a visit with the other demon who has foresight apparently, and she shows her a future where Shirayuki and the other sentinel Kiyomasa are about to lay in bed with one another. And Susune cannot believe that's true because she knows that Jinta and Shirayuki both love each other, and she kind of pushed away her own feelings for Jinta to allow for these two to get together. She even like stopped her body from progressing into adulthood in order for Jinta and Shirayuki to get together. So when Shirayuki and Kiyomosa are in the shrine together, Kiyomosa kind of tells her like, okay, well, we gotta do it now, otherwise it's not it won't be doable when Jinta comes back. Or do you want him to catch us in the act? So Shirayuki pretty much, she applies herself and is like, yeah, let's do it right now, right? braces herself, makes the decision that this is the time when she has to produce a heir, and and Kiyomosa is pretty deterred from it because prior to this he also had a talk with Jinta where he he tells him, okay, how are you okay with me marrying her? And he also has the same question for her, like, how are you okay marrying me when I know both of you also have feelings for one another? I guess for him, duty is one thing, and love, just well, for all three of them, duty is one thing, and love is another. But these Jinta and Shirayuki pretty much take it to the extreme where the duty comes before their own personal feelings. And as Junta comes to his senses from his fight, uh, he realizes that his arm is back, and I can only conclude that that's because the demon's arm that he chopped off that grabbed them kind of fused with them. So now we have Jinta, who's probably now part demon, going back to protect everybody in the village. And Susune arrives with the other demon to see Shirayuki and Kiyomosa about to commit the act. I want to say that Susune was very impressionable because as she prevented herself from growing both mentally and physically, this other demon took advantage of her and caused her to have this internal conflict and made it so that she became the demon that she's supposed to become. Which we know she is probably the demon that ate the form, one of the it's a Kihime's, because she then ages herself up to be around Jinta and Shirayuki's age. And as soon as Jinta arrives to kind of save Shirayuki, Shirayuki gets decapitated. So Susune kind of cuts her head off, and now Jinta's just left there with Shirayuki's body, and now he's full of rage, where now he's actually trying to get answers from Susune as to why she did that. And Susune being like, okay, well, listen here. I know you both loved one another, but she was not going to be with you, and that did not sit well with her. So they get into fighting, and pretty much Jinta, you see Jinta's arm become demon-like, which now it's confirmation that he is kind of like a demon, but not, and he is willing to end Susune, who he used to view as a sister, because the moment she killed Shirayuki, she ceased to be his sister in his eyes. She became the demons that he hunts. So now it's not even about who he. It's not even about keeping Susune alive. It's about revenge for Shirayuki. And Jinta was pretty close to ending Susune, but luckily for Susune, the other demon came in to save her at the end, as giving her enough time to escape. And as Susune is escaping, she proclaims to Jinta that she will destroy everything. So now that Jinta kind of crushed her feelings towards him, she has no more emotional connection to this world, and that's why she's gonna make sure nobody else has anything, or that's the catalyst of her wanting to destroy the world. Her losing Jinta's love has left a hole that is not going to be able to be filled, especially considering she is pretty much immortal. And a last effort, last heroic scene, Shinta just holds Shirayuki's body for the last time and, proclaims that he does love her and screams to the void, bowing, to avenge her. And as things are coming to a close in the episode, Ginta finally receives the Yorai blade, which is a relic of Shirayuki's family, which is supposed to hold holy power to strong enough to beat any demon. And now it's his, as the elder chief apologizes to him for trying to force Shirayuki to marry his own son and being kind of like the catalyst for everything that happened in the shrine that day. And so Jinta leaves the village, decides to train for 170 years as he prepares for Susune to eventually reappear, ready to destroy the world. And it kicks off. And that ends the first episode. So, my overall thoughts. I think the story buildup from the beginning to end was great. It got me very attached to the characters. It got me invested in our main character Shinta, and it left a pretty good impression. Seeing his growth, seeing how he became the very same creatures he hunted towards the end, and overall just very good world building, very good characterizations. Animation was amazing. I think this is gonna be one of the better anime to air this season, and if you need to watch it, it is on High Dive, so take it as you will. Overall, this is the only episode this week I give a 10 out of 10. So that's it on Sword of the Demon Hunter. Uh, Kowloon generic romance. So this anime is probably one of the better ones that I've seen this week. Don't with the It starts off with our main character Kujira just seeing how she gets up in the morning, right, and how she starts off her routine with some cigarettes and fresh watermelon. The opening for this anime, I think it's really great. I love it. One of my favorites this season as well. And as we're seeing Kujirai get go on through her day, you start seeing the town, which the town I love the background in this town. It gives a very old style, which is very prevalent to the show, and it gives it looks kind of like watercoloring. So if this town feels really old and nostalgic to it. But as Kujira is going through town, we start seeing news about this thing called the generic Terra, which is like floating above the town, and it's very prevalent that the government is involved in it and being funded by everybody, essentially. And yeah, then we arrive at Kujira's job with Kuro, who makes her late. And as an apology, he kind of was like, okay, well, maybe I'll treat you to lunch today, And we get more world build. This anime has a lot of world building in this first episode, with the coworkers discussing about how this town is old, but like nobody leaves the town, and the population doesn't really go down, and how there's any new store that opens up in this town, eventually gets shut down, or it doesn't stay there long enough or it doesn't survive in it. So like there's something going on in this town that prevents newer uh stores to stay open long enough to establish themselves. Whether it's the government or the people overall just refusing to acknowledge their existence is to be seen. But I think it's very telling that this is technically supposed to be a romance anime. Uh, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that if you pay attention, you start noticing a lot of it. Um, and also there's the whole thing with like the buildings, right? Well, Kujira and Kudo start talking. They start talking about this abandoned uh, apartment near where Kujirai sleeps that is very old, and if it was painted, could probably be a bit more inhabited by people. But also we get to an understanding, or to like understand Kudo's view on the town, and also Kujirai's view per se of Kudo as they're like having their little smoke break. They Kudo starts discussing how he hates the generic Terra, which is kind of like a very heavily implemented project by the government, and he feels that the town should not be changing. Kudo wants the town to stay the same because, as like I said, the town looks very run down and it has its own flavor to it, its own style to it, very nostalgic feeling to it. It keeps people a nice warmth that while everything else in the world may change, this town very much remains a constant rock where people can stay in, and a constant unchanging fact. And the only one of the interesting parts about this is that Kujira does not view this town as nostalgic, but she does point out that Kudo and how she feels towards Kudo feels very nostalgic, or how Kudo is very nostalgic. And in here, Kudo kind of like takes a close look on her, and it's like, okay, you got crow's feet. Very, very, very funny, but also it's like these two are very close to the point where Kudo's not afraid to like get close to her face. Almost like trying to be intimate, but also not be intimate with her. And as Kujira has no idea why Kudo feels disattached to the town not changing, Kudo is like, okay, well, I'm gonna take you out so you can experience the goods of Kowloon town. And I love they as they're going through their nightly splurge of food. You just see montages of them, and you see how they interact with the stores and stuff. And now they finally get to this restaurant where Kudo is a regular to, which I found very interesting because at the end of this like little coffee espionage or coffee date at the end, the guy that runs it, or like the bartender, kind of tells Kujira like, oh, it's very nice to see Kudo with his girlfriend again. And this just brings up questions of like, okay, so Kudo has a girlfriend, or had a girlfriend? What happened with her? Like, is she still in town? Is she gone? Or what is happening that that Kudo is getting chummy with Kujira, if he still has one, or if they're not, or if she reminds him of her, what is going on? And to put it more lightly, there's more because of everything that they discussed in the earlier episode about the spare room that, or the spare apartment that could use a painting. uh, Kujirai takes it upon herself to paint it, and because one thing about it is that the tenants tend to let things just rot and not maintain them, so that they preserve this old style that's with the town, where like everything's kind of old and rusty and not new. I mean, but Kudo kind of like uh was able to get to her in time as she's about to faint, and brings her kind of to life, and then he's kind of like, okay, well, we got a painter, right? So he's like, you can see little quirks of Kudo are starting to like rub off on Kujira in here, and Kujira's like, okay, well, that's nice that some of my quirks are rubbing off on you. And then we have the scene with her and Kudo, as Kudo's sleeping, and she tries to wake him up, and as she's waking him up, he opens his eyes and sees her, and then just grabs her and kisses her, and it was more than just a kiss. It felt like, or it was even more than just a reflex. It felt like this was a something he was used to, something he has done prior, something that he couldn't wait to do again. Almost like he has this past with Kujirai, and we are left in the dark for it. But after he becomes more awake, he pushes her away, and it's like, okay, sorry, wrong one. So now we have even more of an understanding that maybe Kujira reminds Kudo a lot of its ex, or looks a lot like his ex, that he's so well reminded of her because of Kujira. And then Kujira somehow stumbles upon Kudo's desk, um, which holds a picture of him and his ex-girlfriend, who looks exactly like her. So no matter what ended up happening, it very much seemed like, okay, well, one thing's for certain: either Kujira has amnesia, or Kudo is hiding and Kudo doesn't want to tell her, or maybe Kujira has a doppelganger. One of those two. I'm leaning more towards Kujira having amnesia, and Kudo kind of trying to rekindle what they had prior, and now we have Kujira going to try to find the old place, not the old, but the place where Kudo took her to last time, and she found it when she wasn't looking for it, and when she went there, she realized when she arrived, she talked to the guy that was telling her about his current, or his Kudo's ex, and then he's like, oh, well, actually, that photo, I took it upon your engagement with them. And now this opens up a lot of questions, like, okay, so they were definitely this opens up the real question of, like, is it really amnesia that she doesn't remember? Is there something going on with town that's making her forget, or what happened to make her forget? Because now it's starting to really feel like this nostalgia feeling she's having is a prior memory of her, and not necessarily her having a doppelganger that looks just like her that Kudo is seeing. But yeah, what a way to end the episode with that kind of like cliffhanger ish. My overall thoughts on this: I think the world building in this anime is looking good. The characters are interesting. Dynamics between Kudo and Kujirai are looking great, and the whole mystery of Kudo's ex-girlfriend, or what relationship he has with Kujirai, how that's gonna go forward. Uh, is Kujirai Kudo's actual like past fiance, and now she doesn't remember? And I feel like the government that implemented this generic Terra has something to do with the town remaining as it is, or maybe this town is like the only place where they're actually fighting this new uprising of technology in the world. There is a lot for me to really dive deep into for this anime, and I'm very glad it is the way it is. So for me, this was another 9 out of 10 episode. Uh, and that's it. That's all I have on this podcast. So if you enjoyed what I discussed, what I talked about, any of the animes that I talked about, make sure you leave a like, a comment, subscribe on YouTube, and if you're on Twitch, make sure you follow me on Twitch. I discuss these anime episodes on Twitch first, and then I upload them to YouTube. So if you want to catch them like 3 days early, make sure you follow the Twitch. It'll be down below in the description of YouTube. And until next time, bye.